Good afternoon and welcome to St Mary's Perivale, where we have a keen audience this afternoon. And for once on a Tuesday afternoon, it's not solo piano. We have a violin and piano recital this afternoon, and it promises to be excellent. And more than that, it's all Baroque repertoire here, and we need more. So this is redressing the balance. We have two wonderful Baroque musicians who are playing Baroque repertoire, and they're both from the States. You can read all about them on our website, and you can also see the full program on the YouTube channel. But in brief, it's Keir GoGwilt on violin and George Fu on piano. George has played here many times before, fantastic pianist. Keir hasn't, but it's great to have him along this afternoon. And you can see their enterprising program of Purcell, Sweelinck, Westhoff, the Bach Chaconne, the famous Chaconne, and then CPE Bach Violin Sonata. You're in for a treat, so without more ado, let's give a big round of applause to our musicians. It's on, George. You want to say hello?
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm George. If you've been here before, hello again. If you haven't seen me before, hello, I'm George. We have a very interesting program today. Keir is a longtime friend of mine. Back we did an undergraduate together at Harvard. And he's actually was in town in London playing a really extraordinary performance at Cafe Auto yesterday. And so it just so worked out that we had the state here, and Hugh thought he was up for this really cool program. It's interrogating a lot of different kinds of strands of music, but for me personally, not to speak for Keir, it's kind of looking at where we came from and how we get to where we are now. It's very abstract, but in many pedagogical circles, the music of J.S. Bach, for instance, feels very abstract and almost like it existed there before. But he was actually a very omnivorous musician. He was a keen improviser. And he had lots of composers before him, which influenced him a lot. And that music also carried on to music after him. And I think this program kind of looks at that and traces a line through the music. So that's it.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done, George. I'll put it here.
The next piece is by Jan Petersen Sweelinck. Has anybody heard of this composer before? You guys have. Oh, a few people. That's great. Sweelinck was a 16th century organist in the Netherlands. And he's kind of seen as one of the big forefathers of organ playing and the organ tradition in like north of Germany and that part of the world. In this next piece is a set of variations called on a theme called Mein Junges Leben hat ein End. My young life has an end. Very cheerful. It's a lament, essentially. And he's basically taken a little theme and he's transformed it 6 times. And each time you can see almost the little things that he's working with. Like there's a little thing that goes up, a little thing goes down. And the ornamentation's actually very well understood and very much in part of an improvised tradition as the time. Much as we can now relate to a lot of jazz playing. You know, there are like little figurations and things that we like to use to decorate. And I think it's a very good example of how they came to generate material and generate music. And you also hear that carrying forward in what Keir is going to be playing. So here we go.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Hugh told me I'd had a bit of explaining to do, so here I am doing it. Thanks, Hugh, for having us here, and thank you, George, for inviting me. It's so wonderful to hear my friend play again after many, many years. The first, George already sort of alluded to this, but this assemblage of pieces is kind of an exploration into how very familiar musical materials can sound very different put in different contexts, traveling both through geography and place and time. So one of the nice things about playing early music is feeling a bit like you're traveling through time and sort of experiencing historical materials in a very hands-on way. So you'll notice that Johann Paul von Westhoff is not the only compositor listed in this assemblage. It also includes some music by Keir Chen, who is actually still alive, which, imagine that. And she's written a study on Westhoff in which she takes these very tight Baroque dance forms, which are in binary form, and sort of extends them out into more fantastical explorations. I'll talk a little bit more about this when I get to the Bach, but the very elderly Westhoff would have encountered Bach at the very beginning of his career in Weimar in Germany towards the end of the 17th century. And so there is a good deal of evidence that this Partita by Westhoff was a model for Bach's partitas for solo violin, which is another reason it's a nice pairing. So without further ado, here is Johann Paul von Westhoff. It's a bit of a mashup, Westhoff plus Keir Chen, so I hope you enjoy it. So the next piece I'll play is the Bach Chaconne, which is kind of casually known as like the greatest masterpiece in the history of music. But no pressure. One thing I will say about it is that I think the idea of the piece oftentimes overshadows the piece itself. And to remedy that, I have recently been listening to dozens and dozens of recordings to be like, I really want to just like know what the piece is. I want to get over the idea of it and just get to the thing itself. And kind of in thinking about, you know, the Chaconne and like doing a bit of research into where it came from and how it developed such a huge reputation, I found some really interesting things, which including the fact that the genre, the Chaconne, actually comes from, believe it or not, South America. That in the 16th century, Spanish conquistadors heard this thing that they started calling the Chaconne. It was like a lively, kind of swirling, sexy dance that they were hearing. And the Chaconne, in turn, ended up being an export from the New World back to the Iberian Peninsula, and then made its way over the centuries to Germany, to France. And so Bach's Chaconne, which is the French, or the Chaconne is sometimes known, the Italian, is really very distantly related to that original Chaconne from South America. And I'm not claiming that the Bach Chaconne is particularly sexy, but what I will say is that one thing that stays with it is the dance quality, and this kind of obsessive churning variations on a bass line, which we already heard in the Purcell and the variation form of the Sweelinck that George played. And here in the Chaconne, it's kind of taken to the next kind of obsessive level. Another kind of, this is not related to the Chaconne, but the Chaconne happens at the end of Bach's second Partita, which has the same movement structure as the Westhoff, an allemande, courante, sarabande, and a gigue. And the sarabande is another dance with very interesting history. Zarabanda is the Spanish, which comes from the Central African language Bantu, and Salabanda, which means, which has a very religious meaning in African contexts of African dance and music. And the Zarabanda also came from the New World, from slaves who were taken from Africa to the States, and their music and their dance was heard and again exported to Europe and turned into these rarefied court dances. So that's in there as well. Speaking of like transference of materials and recontextualization of musical pieces, bits and pieces. So without further ado, the greatest masterpiece in the history of music, the Bach Chaconne. Remind me not to forget this. Yeah, sure. So now we're going to play a piece by the more famous Bach, CPE Bach, who actually was more famous in his time than his father. Quite a bit much more, actually. He was employed by King Frederick the Great, the Emperor of Prussia, and it was a pretty sweet job. And he had a lot of free time to do a lot of more speculative and fun projects than composing cantatas every week. And yeah, I don't know what else there is to say about C.P. Bach. You want to say something?
Yeah. He was kind of known as also quite controversial. He loved writing treatises on really crazy ideas and stuff. And sometimes you can hear in the music, even though it's like quite classical in form, there's always a little turn that makes you go, huh? And I think that's one of the really interesting things about his music, and that's one of the reasons why they saw him as such an innovator in composition. Keir, I was also wondering, could you tell everybody a little bit about that bow you've got, which is a different bow?
Yeah. This is the first time I'm ever performing with this bow in public, so good luck to you all. But this is a bow that my uncle made. My uncle is a Baroque violinist who is based now in Cologne in Germany, but originally is Scottish. But yeah, this bow, it's made of snakewood. It's a model. It's based on a painting of Corelli holding his bow, and you see it has this very long end here, and this very kind of nicely shaped point. So that's a Corelli model bow, which we're using to play CPE Bach. But that's just how it goes. So yeah.
Not going to say too much more, but as you also noticed, we're playing on a modern piano, on a modernish violin, and it's like a big debate about how kosher is it to, how authentic do you want to get? And I think this is something that we talk about from time to time as well. I think there's something about the spirit of doing it in a modern style that's also very evocative, and there are a bunch of different colors. You'll notice I use pedal, and it sounds good. So there you go.
I think it sounds good.
I think it sounds good, at least.
I think it sounds good.
Yeah, okay. Good. So here we go, CPE Bach.
Well, wasn't that gorgeous and charming music? Makes a change from Rachmaninoff all the time. Even I have to admit that. It was gorgeous and terrific music, beautifully presented and wonderfully played by both musicians. We've not had a Baroque violin here for at least a decade, if not longer. But it was terrific. So I was enormously impressed with both George and Keir. So if you've enjoyed that from afar, you might like to show your appreciation in a tangible form and go to our website to keep these concerts ticking over. Thank you very much for your support. You can donate via the PayPal facility on the website. On Thursday, we have a very good piano duo combination playing lovely repertoire, a bit more mainstream by Schubert and Brahms and things. And then on Sunday afternoon, we have a conversation with the eminent pianist Peter Frankel, wonderful musician, one of the great pianists of the last few decades. That's on Sunday afternoon. Thank you very much for being with us. Our technician upstairs today has been Rob Jenkins, who's done a terrific job. My wife, Felicity, is on box office at the back. Been great pleasure having you. Thank you very much for coming, and do tune in again. And from West London, good afternoon.